The black girl was looked down upon on her very first day at the new school. That is, until her mother showed up, shocking everyone when they realized who she really was. "You can sit down now, Harlow. Let's keep things realistic, okay?" The words sliced through her chest like a cold wind, leaving behind a sting that wasn't visible but felt in every bone of her 12-year-old body. The classroom had gone quiet. Not the kind of quiet that happens when someone finishes talking, but that heavy silence, the kind that lands like a stone in your stomach. Harlow could hear the scratch of someone's pencil and a soft snicker from the back row. Her fingers tightened around the photo she was holding. Her mama in a clean white NASA jumpsuit standing next to a rocket prototype. "I am being realistic," she whispered. But it was too soft, lost beneath the weight of disbelief around her. She hadn't expected Meadowbrook Middle to be warm and welcoming. It was a small-town school, mostly white, tucked behind a grocery store and a Baptist church. Harlow was the new girl, the only black kid in her science class, and the one who wore galaxy print hoodies and named stars out loud like they were friends. She had only been there 3 weeks, but every lunch period felt like she was orbiting alone on some planet nobody else wanted to land on. Today was supposed to be different. Career Day. A chance to shine. Her mama, Dr. Tessa Walker, had mailed her the folder with care, full of laminated pictures, mission plans, and a printout from a NASA article about the Artemis project. Harlow had practiced her little speech in the mirror for 3 nights straight. "My name is Harlow Walker, and my mom is a propulsion engineer at NASA. She's working on Artemis, the mission that's going to take us back to the moon." And when her turn came, she stood up straight, her heart fluttering like the wings of one of those monarch butterflies they talked about in science class. She'd barely gotten through her first sentence before Mrs. Porter, the science teacher with short, stiff hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, cut her off. "That's quite the imagination, Harlow." Some kids giggled. One whispered something Harlow couldn't hear, but she caught the word liar. "I'm not lying," she said louder, holding up a glossy photo of her mama with 2 astronauts. "She really works for NASA. That's her on the right." Mrs. Porter leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "Sweetheart, I'm sure your mom is a very smart woman, but let's be honest. Women like us don't usually lead space missions. This exercise is about real jobs, okay? Not fantasies." There it was. Women like us. But she didn't mean women. She meant black women. And everyone in the room knew it. The laugh came next. Not a belly laugh, not even a chuckle. It was that half-snort, half-smirk noise adults make when they think they know better. It hit Harlow harder than if the woman had slapped her. She stood there, clutching her folder, her voice jammed in her throat. Nobody said anything, not even the kids who might have believed her. Their silence screamed just as loud. Then Mrs. Porter spoke again, that same tone dripping sugar and vinegar. "Now, why don't we hear from someone else? Matthew, your hand was up earlier. Your dad works at the hardware store, right?" Harlow sank back into her seat, the plastic chair cold against her legs. Her face burned, her lips pressed tight like she was trying to hold in all the words she wanted to scream. She didn't cry. She wouldn't. Her mama had always said, "Crying's not weakness, baby, but don't you let nobody ever make you feel like your truth don't matter." But sitting there, feeling the eyes on her, all of them, Harlow did feel weak and small, like a tiny moon drifting too far from its planet. She looked down at the pictures again, trembling fingers brushing across her mama's smile. "They don't know you," she thought. "They don't know who you are." And yet, somehow, that didn't stop them from deciding what her mama couldn't be. Mrs. Porter moved on like nothing happened, talking about accounting and customer service, about realistic paths and practical careers. Harlow didn't hear any of it. Her ears buzzed, and her chest felt tight like the time she tried climbing that hill behind their apartment and couldn't catch her breath. The door creaked open with a soft click, barely louder than the shuffle of Mrs. Porter's flats across the linoleum. The bell hadn't rung for class change, so most of the kids didn't even look up until they heard the voice. "Sorry to interrupt, but I believe I'm expected." Every neck turned in sync, like dominoes. The room went still, dead quiet. Standing in the doorway was a woman dressed in a navy blazer, zipped halfway over a fitted black NASA shirt. Her skin was the same warm brown as Harlow's. Her hair was twisted up in a neat bun, and she carried a silver case in one hand like it weighed nothing. But it wasn't just what she wore, it was how she stood, like she didn't owe the world an apology for being exactly who she was. Behind her, Principal Redmond hovered with that nervous kind of grin folks wear when they know something important's about to happen. "Class," he said, adjusting his tie, "this is Dr. Tessa Walker, lead propulsion engineer for NASA's Artemis mission. She'll be giving a short presentation today for Career Week." Mrs. Porter froze. She blinked once, twice, and her hands dropped slowly from where they'd been smoothing her skirt. Harlow's breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. She hadn't known. Mama hadn't said a word. Tessa scanned the room, but her eyes landed on Harlow first, red around the edges, glassy. She saw it all in a glance, the hunch in her daughter's shoulders, the tremble in her bottom lip. And just like that, she knew something had gone very wrong. "Thank you, Principal Redmond," Tessa said with a calm that could settle a storm. She walked to the front of the class, set her case down, and turned toward the students. "Before I begin, I'd like to know, has anyone here already heard about the Artemis mission? Maybe from a classmate?" A long pause. No hands, eyes darting. Then, from the back row, a boy with pale skin and bright red hair, Eli, lifted his hand part way. His voice came out small. "Harlow said something, yesterday, about her mom working at NASA." Tessa turned slightly, eyebrows raised. "Did she?" Eli swallowed. "Mrs. Porter said it was made up. She said women like Harlow's mom don't do stuff like that." A chill swept through the room. Harlow could feel her chest squeezing again, but not from shame this time. This time it was from the weight of something cracking wide open. Mrs. Porter cleared her throat. I may have misunderstood. We were discussing—" Tessa held up a hand. Not rudely, just firm. "It's all right. Misunderstandings happen, but I find it best to clear them up with facts." She opened her silver case and began to pull out small models, diagrams, and a thin tablet. The silence in the room thickened, not awkward now, just expectant. "I've been with NASA for 17 years, Tessa began. "I've designed engine systems for Mars orbiters, collaborated with international partners on lunar landers, and last month I became the lead propulsion engineer for Artemis Phase 3. That means I help build and test the systems that'll carry astronauts to the moon, and one day, maybe even farther." The models clicked into place on the table, pieces of a dream turned solid. Engines, capsules, trajectories. She moved with precision, each movement a quiet display of authority, earned over years no one in that classroom could yet imagine. "And this," she said, picking up a laminated photo, "is the team I work with. You'll notice the woman on the far left." She passed the photo down the first row, and it slowly made its way around the room. "That's me," she added. "And the girl sitting in the third row, wearing a Galaxy hoodie? That's my daughter, Harlow." All heads turned again. Harlow stared at her desk. Tessa looked at Mrs. Porter. "Would you mind if Harlow helped me with this part?" The teacher hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Of course." Harlow stood on legs that didn't feel like hers and walked to the front. Her mother gave her a soft smile, one that said, "I see you. I know what they did, and I'm here." Harlow stood at the front of the class, her fingers twitching at her sides, unsure of where to put them. The models on the table gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Small replicas of the Artemis capsule, the launch boosters, and the ion thruster she and Mama had built out of thin tubing and tiny LEDs. She didn't look at the class, not yet, but she could feel them, the stares, the heat of eyes that had once rolled or squinted with doubt. The same ones that had looked past her like she was air now waited for her to speak. Tessa gently tapped the side of the tiny engine model. "Go ahead, baby. Tell them what it does." Harlow took a breath, not deep, but enough to unlock her voice. "This is a model of an ion propulsion system," she said, eyes fixed on the model. Her voice wobbled, but she kept going. "It uses electricity to speed up ions. That makes a kind of thrust, but it's cleaner and more efficient than chemical fuel." Someone in the middle row let out a low, surprised whistle. Mrs. Porter's arms folded, but her shoulders dropped just a little. Tessa stayed quiet, letting the silence stretch, not to make anyone uncomfortable, but to give room for the words to settle in. Then she stepped forward. "Now, I'd like to take a moment to clear something up," she said calmly, with a warmth that didn't soften the edge of her words. "There's a difference, an important one, between scientific skepticism and personal prejudice." She looked straight at Mrs. Porter, not mean, not smug, just steady. "In science, we're taught to ask questions, to doubt, to test before we believe. That's healthy. That's how we grow. But assuming someone can't be something just because of how they look?" She paused, eyes sweeping the class now. "That's not science. That's bias, and it doesn't belong in any room where learning happens." No one moved. No one even shifted. Tessa continued, her voice still gentle. "I've had people doubt me for years, folks with more degrees than kindness. They didn't believe I was a scientist until I spoke at a conference or walked through a control center with my badge showing. Some still don't. But I've learned the truth has a way of standing on its own. Eventually, it makes the noise quiet down." She stepped back, nodding at Harlow. "And now you've seen that truth for yourself." Harlow looked up, then, and slowly something cracked open inside her. Her chin lifted. She turned toward the class, her fingers resting lightly on the capsule model. "This part connects the crew to the command center," she said, more sure this time. "And this one right here," she pointed to a thin silver arm, "helps control re-entry so the ship doesn't burn up when it comes back." A few students leaned forward. One girl in the second row whispered, "Dang, that's cool," and didn't even try to hide it. Mrs. Porter stepped closer, arms still crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well," she said finally, clearing her throat, "that's certainly advanced for a 12-year-old." "It is," Tessa replied, turning to her. "And maybe that's the lesson here. We shouldn't be deciding what kids can or can't understand before we've even given them the chance to show us." Mrs. Porter didn't speak. She blinked, glanced at Harlow, then away. Her silence, for once, was not power. It was surrender. The kind that comes not from defeat, but realization. The classroom, still hushed, had shifted. You could feel it in the air, something unspoken unraveling itself. Guilt, respect, maybe even curiosity. Tessa's voice found its rhythm again. Science doesn't care what color your skin is, or if you're a girl, or if you come from a town most people never heard of. It only asks one thing. Do you want to know more? That's all. That's enough. She looked down at Harlow, and for a heartbeat nobody said a word. Then someone clapped. Just one kid. Then another. And another. It wasn't loud. It didn't shake the room. But it was honest. Afterward, as the class packed up to leave, a few students hovered. One boy asked how fast the engine could go in real life. Another girl asked if it was hard to get into NASA. Tessa answered every question like she had all the time in the world. Porter stayed back, fiddling with her glasses. She didn't speak to Harlow, not yet. But Harlow wasn't looking for an apology. She wasn't waiting. She had something better. As she zipped up her backpack, her mother whispered, "Proud of you, Starshine." Harlow smiled. Not big, but real. It started with a whisper. The next morning, as Harlow walked through the school hallway, head up, back straight, hands gripping the strap of her backpack, a few kids looked her way. Some nodded. One girl, a 7th grader she didn't know by name, smiled, almost shy. "Hey," she said, soft but sure. "That was really cool yesterday." Harlow blinked. She managed a "thanks" before the girl melted into her group of friends. By lunchtime it had grown from a whisper into a quiet buzz. Not everyone believed it, not everyone liked it. Some still mumbled when she passed, still whispered, "NASA girl," like it was a joke. But it didn't cut as deep anymore. Not after she'd stood up there, explained systems and ions and spaceflight in front of the whole class, especially with her mother beside her, grounded like a mountain, calm like open sky. Something inside her had shifted, something that had curled up and hidden the day Mrs. Porter laughed at her. Now it had stretched out again, cautious but stronger. She didn't feel invisible anymore, and yet the school itself. It still hummed with tension. Parents had started calling. Some were angry, accused the school of embarrassing a teacher. Others said their children came home asking about rockets and wanted to check out space books from the library. One mother dropped off a donation at the front office for more science materials. One father called to say Olivia, his daughter, wanted to be an engineer now. He asked if the school had a robotics club. Principal Redmond, usually hard to pin down, started showing up in the cafeteria more. His usual tight smile had deepened into something more thoughtful. He was listening, watching, and just like that, change began. Not loud, not fast, but it started. 1 week later, during the Friday morning announcements, Principal Redmond stepped into each homeroom instead of broadcasting over the intercom. He said it was too important to deliver through a crackling speaker. He stood in front of Harlow's class, hands clasped, the air holding steady as everyone waited. "We've decided to hold a school-wide science fair," he said, eyes scanning the room. "Next month. We want every student who's curious about how the world works, or how the stars move, for that matter, to have a chance to show us what they're made of." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "And to help us get it right, we've asked Dr. Tessa Walker to serve as one of our guest judges." There were gasps, a few claps. Even Mrs. Porter gave a stiff nod. But Harlow? She just sat frozen, her heart doing that little dance inside her chest. Not for her mother, but for the chance. Later that night, over grilled cheese and tomato soup, Harlow cleared her throat. "Mama?" Tessa looked up from her laptop. "I think I want to do a propulsion project for the science fair. The ion engine, the one y'all are testing for Artemis Phase 3. Tessa's eyebrows lifted. "That's advanced stuff, Harlow." "I know. It's complex, more college level than middle school. I know that too. She pushed her soup away. But I've been reading, and I understand the basics. I can learn the rest. I want to try, not because of you, she looked down, but because of me. Tessa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes warm but full of warning. You know what you're saying, right? You're asking to do something that's going to take time, focus, and a whole lot of patience. I got all three, Harlow said, her voice firm. Tessa's eyes narrowed, proud and concerned all at once. All right, then, she said finally. Let's get to work. The dining table disappeared first, then the end of the counter. Diagrams, coils of wire, printed manuals from NASA's Open Research Library, all spread across the apartment like a second skin. Evenings turned into quiet hums of focus. Tessa guided where needed, but never led. This was Harlow's journey. Remember, she'd say, pointing to a scribbled note on thrust vectoring, you don't need to build a working engine, just one that shows how it works. But Harlow didn't stop at showing. She soldered wires under a desk lamp, her tongue sticking out slightly like it helped her concentrate. She scrolled forums late at night, read about electron streams and magnetic fields. Once, Tessa found her asleep on the rug with a textbook under her arm and a pencil still tucked behind her ear. She pulled a blanket over her daughter and whispered, Lord, give her strength, and give me the patience not to jump in too soon. The night before the fair, the living room was quiet except for the whir of the tiny fan inside Harlow's model. The engine was small, made from scratch and salvaged parts, painted silver with blue LED lights lining the sides. Ready to test? Tessa asked, crouched beside her. Harlow gave a single nod. Hands steady, she flipped the switch. The faint hum began. Then a soft glow, pale blue, just like in the photos from NASA. Not loud, not showy, but alive. It works, she whispered. Tessa's hand went to her mouth. Then her arm wrapped around Harlow's shoulders. You did that, she said. You! For a second, neither of them moved. The model glowed steady beside them, a tiny echo of stars far away. And for the first time, Harlow didn't feel like a kid pretending to be something bigger. She was something bigger, and tomorrow the whole school would see. The gym smelled like rubber floors and anticipation. Banners hung crooked from the rafters. Riverside Science Fair 2025, with stars and atoms drawn in red and gold paint by the art club. Tables lined the walls, most covered in construction paper volcanoes, food coloring experiments, and solar system mobiles made of foam balls and coat hangers. And there, off to the far right, in a corner barely big enough for 2 chairs, sat Harlow's table. The model engine rested at the center like a small monument, wires tucked neat, lights off for now, like it was waiting. Next to it stood her diagram, hand-drawn and labeled with precise handwriting, every part of the ion propulsion system clearly explained, and beside her, straightening a roll of tape for the 3rd time, was Zoe. Zoe Washington had been quiet the first week Harlow arrived, never unkind, but cautious, the way some kids are when the world's told them not to get too close to ambition. She used to eat lunch alone with a sci-fi book pressed tight against her tray like a shield. But something had shifted after the NASA presentation. She started sitting closer, asking questions, smiling more. And when Harlow mentioned needing a hand setting up her display, Zoe was already rolling up her sleeves. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the gym fill up with students, parents, and teachers. The buzz of conversation was louder than the hum of any motor. "You nervous?" Zoe asked, adjusting her glasses. "A little," Harlow admitted, though the knot in her stomach said a lot. "You got this." Harlow glanced at her and smiled. "Thanks." Judges began to circle, clipboards in hand. Teachers, a few folks from the district, and, in the back of the group, walking slowly but deliberately, Mrs. Porter. Harlow saw her before Zoe did. She felt that old flutter of heat in her cheeks, the echo of the shame from weeks ago. But it passed quickly, because now it felt different. Now Harlow knew who she was. Mrs. Porter didn't say a word as she approached. She stopped in front of the display, eyes moving over every detail, her expression unreadable, lips pressed into a thin, straight line. Harlow looked her straight in the eye and spoke, clear, calm, certain. "This is a working model of an ion propulsion engine. It uses electricity to accelerate ions, in this case simulated by lightweight particles, to generate thrust in a vacuum. It's not designed for Earth travel, but it's far more efficient for long-distance space missions." The room didn't go quiet, but the space around Harlow did. She didn't hear the murmurs, didn't feel the shuffling feet. All she saw was the nod of one judge, the scribble of another's pen. She continued, pointing to her labeled parts. "This component here channels the ionized gas. It's directed through a magnetic field, which accelerates the particles outward. The reaction force pushes the spacecraft forward." Zoe stepped in to flip the switch. The small blue light blinked on. The soft hum filled the silence. Students nearby stopped mid-sentence. Mrs. Porter leaned in. "It runs?" she asked, voice lower than usual. Harlow nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The light's just visual, but the design is based on the real propulsion systems NASA's developing. My mom's on the Artemis team. She helped me understand the math." Mrs. Porter paused, eyes scanning the display again. "Impressive," she finally said. Not with awe, not with sarcasm, just honesty. Zoe gave Harlow a sideways glance. Harlow exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time all morning. Behind the crowd, near the bleachers, Tessa stood with Principal Redmond, watching quietly. Her hands stayed folded, but her smile was steady, the kind that didn't need to be big to say everything. "She's got a gift," Redmond murmured. Tessa didn't look away from the booth. "She's always had it, just needed space to grow." More students crowded in now, drawn by the glow and the murmurs of real NASA stuff. Some were the same kids who'd laughed before. One boy asked how fast the engine could go. Another girl wanted to know how space stayed cold. Harlow answered each question, some quick, some slow, but each one landed with care. And the more she spoke, the more they leaned in. She wasn't showing off. She was teaching, owning her space. The fair moved on, judges finished rounds, other tables emptied, but hers never did. Her voice, soft but sure, carried through the gym, weaving its way through the crowd like a steady orbit. Hours later, when the event closed and folks began to pack up, Harlow sat on the edge of her table, tired but wired, her mind still replaying moments from the day like echoes of stars blinking into view. Zoe nudged her. "You think they'll pick you?" Harlow shrugged. "Doesn't matter." Zoe blinked. "It doesn't?" Harlow smiled, small but steady. "I already won." The next morning, the school gym smelled like fresh polish and folding chairs. The air was heavy with something that hadn't been there before, anticipation. Not the nervous kind, but the quiet, buzzing sort that builds up when something good is about to happen and folks can feel it in their bones. A makeshift stage stood at the front, draped in navy blue with a podium borrowed from the library. Tessa sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap, heart thudding like a soft drum. She wasn't nervous for herself. Her nerves now belonged entirely to Harlow. Beside her, Principal Redmond straightened his notes. The winning projects had been judged the night before, and the results printed early that morning. He'd already told Harlow, privately, just before the rest of the students filled the seats. When he called her name, Harlow walked to the stage slow and calm, not dragging her feet, not rushing either, just steady, like someone who knew they belonged there. She was wearing her best jeans and a clean NASA hoodie zipped halfway. The small scholarship certificate had already been handed to her, folded neatly in her back pocket. But what mattered now wasn't the paper. It was the mic, and the silence waiting for her words. Harlow cleared her throat, took a breath. "Hi," she said, voice soft but firm. "I'm Harlow Walker, and yeah, I guess I won the science fair." A ripple of chuckles moved through the room, genuine, warm. "But this project wasn't just about building something cool," she continued. "It was about proving something, mostly to myself." Her eyes scanned the rows of faces, some familiar, some blank. Near the back, she spotted Mrs. Porter, arms folded across her chest. Her face was unreadable, but she was watching, closely. "A while back," Harlow said, "someone told me girls like me don't run space missions, that we should stick to what's realistic, that maybe my mama couldn't be who she is." She paused. You could have heard a pin drop. "Well, turns out she is, and I am." A few heads nodded. Tessa bit her lip, blinking faster than usual. "I used to think that being smart meant you had to know everything," Harlow said, glancing down at her hands. "But now I know it just means you don't stop asking questions. You don't give up when somebody tells you you're not enough, and you sure don't let anybody else write your story for you." She looked straight ahead then, chin lifted. Her voice didn't waver. "I'm proud to say I love science. I love building things. I love asking, what if? And I hope that anybody out there, especially the ones who've ever been told they don't belong, know that they do. You do, even if you're the only one in the room who believes it." She nodded once and stepped back. The room was silent for a half-second. Then applause broke like a wave, loud, full, unstoppable. Some kids stood. Tessa wiped at her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. Principal Redmond clapped hard enough to make his glasses slide down his nose. Mrs. Porter didn't move, not at first, but as the crowd settled, she slowly made her way through the rows toward the front. Not rushed, not hesitant either, just deliberate. She waited until most of the students had filtered out, then approached Tessa, who was now standing near the stage, arms crossed tight, eyes still a little wet. "Dr. Walker," Porter began, her voice lower than usual, "I'd like a word, if that's all right." Tessa nodded once. Porter cleared her throat, looked down for a moment, then met Tessa's eyes. "I owe you and Harlow an apology. A real one." Tessa said nothing, just waited. "I said something that day I wish I could take back. I didn't think. Or maybe I did, and that's worse." She exhaled slowly. "My grandmother, Eleanor, wanted to be an astronomer. Back in the 50s, she had the grades, the drive. But she was told, flat out, that science was for men, white men. That kind of thing doesn't just disappear. It lingers. It shapes people." She shook her head. "I didn't even realize I'd been carrying that weight, or how I'd passed it on, until I saw your daughter stand up there and teach us all something we should have already known." Tessa's jaw softened. Her arms lowered just a little. "She's remarkable," Porter added, "and not just because of you, because of her." "Oh, thank you," Tessa said quietly. "That means more than you know." "She's got a long road ahead," Porter murmured. Tessa nodded. "But now she knows she can walk it." As the two women stood there, something settled between them. Not friendship, not yet. But the first stitch of something mended. The night skies over Meadowbrook had always been there, wide and quiet. But for the first time in a long while, someone was looking up with purpose. 2 weeks after the science fair, the school announced the formation of the Riverside Astronomy Club, and within days, 32 students had signed up. 32. In a town where the biggest after-school draw used to be JV basketball and the spring musical, that number was something close to a miracle. At the first meeting, folding chairs were set in a semicircle on the school lawn. A telescope, borrowed from the public library, stood proudly on a tripod in the middle, and right next to it, clipboard in hand, was Harlow. She didn't run the club. That job went to Mr. Frey, the civics teacher who once built his own radio telescope in college and had the quiet excitement of a man who never stopped being 10 years old when it came to stars. But Harlow? She led. Kids looked at her when he talked. They asked her what constellations were visible tonight, how to align the scope, whether it was true that Europa had oceans under its surface. It was in these small, regular moments that change began to root itself. By mid-March, something else unexpected bloomed. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of day where the sky hung heavy with rain that wouldn't quite fall. Harlow was heading to the library when she heard her name. "Miss Walker." It was Mrs. Porter, standing just outside the science lab, a clipboard in one hand and something like hesitation in the other. "I was wondering, would you have a moment?" Harlow nodded, unsure, but curious. Inside, Mrs. Porter gestured to the counter, where a poster lay half unrolled. Bold red letters read, "Project Terra Grow, Simulating Martian Agriculture." "We got a grant," Porter explained. "Small one, from the state. Enough to buy a few hydroponic kits and basic sensors. I'd like to develop it as a year-end experiment." Harlow blinked. "With me?" "With you," Porter confirmed. Then, softer, "I could use your help. You understand these systems better than most adults I know." The air between them wasn't heavy anymore, just open, careful, like a window cracked on the first warm day of spring. "I'd like that," Harlow said. And just like that, a partnership was born, not out of apology, but respect. They met after school twice a week. Porter handled the logistics. Harlow dove into the design. Together, they built a model that mimicked Mars's thin atmosphere, regulating carbon dioxide and water flow, tracking growth cycles in microgreens. A few other students joined in over time. It stopped being just a project and started feeling like purpose. Sometimes Tessa would swing by to drop off extra notes from her lab, or a NASA article with scribbled comments in the margins. She never hovered, just smiled, left encouragement, and let her daughter work. And through it all, something else began to grow. Rising stars. It started with a phone call, then a Zoom meeting, then a series of email threads that grew faster than weeds in July. By April, it had a name, a banner, and a team of volunteers. Rising Stars STEM Outreach, a partnership between Riverside School, NASA's Community Engagement Office, and a few local universities. The program would provide resources, mentorship, and workshops for underrepresented kids in science, with Harlow as its first official ambassador. "I don't know what that means," she'd whispered to her mom the night they announced it. Tessa had kissed her forehead. "It means you light the way, baby, and others follow." They launched with a weekend event at the Meadowbrook Community Center. Folding tables became science booths. Parents came with toddlers on their hips and notebooks in their hands. High schoolers gave demos on circuits. College students set up a model rocket lab. And in the middle of it all, wearing her NASA hoodie and a name tag that read Harlow Walker, student presenter, was the girl who used to eat alone. At one booth, a kid no older than 8 tugged on her sleeve. "Is it true?" he asked. "You really built that space engine?" "I did," she smiled. The boy's eyes went wide. "Can I build one too?" "You can build anything," she said. "All you gotta do is believe it's possible." That night, after everyone had packed up, the sky turned deep velvet. Stars began peeking through the clouds like old friends returning home. The astronomy club gathered with thermoses and fold-out chairs, pointing upward, laughing low, whispering wishes into the air. Harlow stood near the back, wrapped in a quilt her grandma had sewn years ago, the corners frayed from love and time. Zoe was beside her, arms crossed, chin tipped up. "You know," Zoe said, "I think about quitting dance." "Yeah?" "Yeah, I might want to study engineering, like real engineering." Harlow looked at her, then at the sky. "You'd be good at it." Zoe kicked at a patch of grass. "You think people like us really get to do that?" Harlow didn't answer right away. She took a breath and let the night hold her words before she gave them shape. "We do now." And then she looked up, past the clouds, past the edges of what was familiar, and smiled at the stars. They were still burning, still waiting. The story of Harlow Walker is a deeply moving and powerful journey of resilience, identity, and quiet revolution. What makes her path so unforgettable is not just her love for science, but the way she faces racial prejudice head-on, with grace, strength, and undeniable brilliance. From the moment Harlow is publicly dismissed by her teacher simply because she's a young black girl daring to dream big, the weight of systemic racism becomes clear. She is underestimated, doubted, and humiliated, not for a lack of knowledge, but for the color of her skin. And yet, she doesn't let it break her. Instead, she chooses to rise, using her intelligence and self-belief as weapons of quiet defiance. The most human and beautiful part of the story is how Harlow doesn't just prove her worth. She plants seeds of change in others. Even those who judged her are forced to confront their own biases. This story teaches a profound lesson. Racism isn't always loud. It can hide in doubt, in disbelief, in silence. But truth, courage, and belief in one's voice can outshine even the darkest prejudice. Harlow's story reminds us that no child should be told they don't belong in the stars, especially not because of their skin. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Leave a comment to tell us how it inspired you, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and be with you every step of the way.